All right. Hello, everybody. My name is David Blevins, and I'm one of the creators of Apache TomEE. I've also been involved with JavaEE just in general for over 10 years. I was one of the co-founders of Apache OpenEJB before it was at Apache, Geronimo as well, and a participant of EE6, EE7, EJB 3.0, EJB 3.1, and 3.2. Sort of informally hanging around CDI and helping out in that spec as well, though I'm not officially on it. And so today I'd like to show you Apache TomEE, which we're just really excited about. So the first question is, what is Apache TomEE? And before I get into that, can I just get a show of hands, who uses Tomcat? Yeah, the entire audience pretty much. Who also uses another server like Glassfish or JBoss? Also the majority of hands. Yeah, that seems to be the way it goes. Typically you get as far as you can on Tomcat, and then you kind of hit a wall and you have to leave Tomcat and then go to another server. And that's the problem that we were trying to solve, really, with TomEE. So what is TomEE? TomEE is Tomcat plus JavaEE, and that's where we get our name. Very clever, right? TomEE, aha. And so we pronounce it TomEE, not TomEE. It's just like the name, like the guy, like the person, TomEE. And it's Tomcat, through and through. So we take Tomcat, we unzip it, we add these jars in there, we add these extra Apache projects, and we zip it back up, we certify that, and we call it TomEE. So in the box, we've got OpenJPA, OpenWebBeans, OpenEJB, MyFaces, Bean validation, and CXF and ActiveMQ. Now there are different distributions of TomEE, and I'll show you those in a second. But what drives the project are really three things, and that's at the bottom there. First of all, we want to be small. So if we offered the world yet another sort of larger app server, I don't think that has much value. So a primary aspect of TomEE is to maintain it being very, very, very small. Be certified. So when you put all these technologies into Tomcat yourself, you can't certify that. You don't have a TCK, you don't have the tests. It's an unfair disadvantage, but that's the way it is. So we want to certify what you use in your Tomcat stack. So it's got to be certified. So when your app deploys on TomEE and it runs there, you could later on move that to JBoss, you could move it to Glassfish, you could move it to WebSphere, or you could do the reverse, of course. It's certified. So now Tomcat is in the realm of certified servers. And then finally, of course, the most critical thing is to be Tomcat. So if we've done something in TomEE that jeopardizes or detracts from your Tomcat experience, we consider that to be an incredibly serious bug, and we will fix it. So keep in mind that if you try something and it doesn't work in TomEE and it works in Tomcat, let us know and we'll take care of it. Absolutely, we love feedback. So a really big question is, what is the web profile? So this one is a lot of people have missed that. So who is familiar with the web profile? Yeah, not quite as many hands. So here's what happened. You know how people say JavaEE is big and bloated? Well, in some regards, it's sort of true. What we did in EE6 was we decided to acknowledge the fact that JavaEE had grown to be quite a large set of specifications, including a lot of things in JavaEE we can't get rid of for backwards compatibility reasons, but aren't really relevant. And so what we did was we took and we chopped the whole set of specifications in half, basically. So the full profile contains about 24 specs, more or less, which is quite a lot of specifications. The web profile is considered the minimum base for developing applications. So that's about half the set of specifications, and that's pretty significant. So a lot of people, when, I like to say, you meet some people and they talk about how bad JavaEE is, or they say J2EE, then you know how really dated that information you're going to get is. The big question is when you encounter somebody that doesn't like JavaEE or says it's big and bloated, ask them, do you know about the web profile? If they say no, stop listening to everything they have to say. If they say yes, then go ahead. They might have some really good points, and then please tell me what those points are so we can get them into the specification and make it better. So there are some things that are not in the web profile which aren't really used, such as CMP entity beans, Corba, JAX-RPC. If any of you have ever had to use any of these things, I feel sorry for you. I've had to implement them, so I know the pain. JAX-RPC is especially a bear. Fortunately, the new JAX-WS is compatible with at least document literal wrapped JAX-RP services, but SOAP and coding stuff, oof. All right, so some good things are not in the web profile that are in the full profile include JAX-RS, JAX-WS, and JMS, and then a small little gem called the connector architecture, which I talked about yesterday. I don't know who might have gone to that talk, but it's a kind of an overlooked specification that we put into TomEE that is going to be really, really, really important coming up. So this leads us to create basically 3 flavors of TomEE. The middle one there is new. So we have the web profile version of TomEE, which doesn't include anything beyond the web profile, with the exception of Java Mail. We threw that into the web profile version of TomEE simply because it's a very small spec, and sending email is kind of a very useful thing. So why not just put it in there? There's no reason to make people download TomEE Plus just to get Java Mail. Then we have a new distribution that we just added, and that is the JAX-RS certified version of TomEE. And actually, in JavaEE 7, JAX-RS is going to be added to the web profile. So the JavaEE 7 version of TomEE will go back down to the to just 2 distributions. So essentially, web profile and JAX-RS versions of TomEE will merge. So TomEE Plus is beyond the web profile significantly. It includes JAX-WS and connector and JMS. So basically, everything that is in JAX-RS, the web profile, and JAX-RS version of TomEE is in the Plus version of TomEE. Now, that is not certified, and the reason for that is the math for certification works like this. If you have 7 things which are certified, you can call that certified. If you add an 8th and that is not certified, you can't call it certified. And then the rules get a little bit strange because essentially TomEE Plus is mostly the full profile, and so there isn't much we can do to call TomEE Plus certified or certified without going all the way and implement the full profile, which includes then adding Corba to it, adding JAX-RS to it, and adding CMP support to it, which is something I don't think people really want us to do, and so we don't. The fortunate thing is that as much as JavaEE 6 was about simplifying and shrinking JavaEE in terms of creation of the web profile, in JavaEE 7, we're actually going to be shrinking the full profile. So that's a really good step forward, and we might be able to see a certified version of TomEE as a full profile server in JavaEE 7. So in JavaEE 7, JAX-RPC is cut, CMP support is cut, and potentially Corba support is cut. That one's still on the table. So if that happens, then we will very likely see a certified, full profile certified version of TomEE, because TomEE Plus is pretty much right there already. All right, so happy birthday, TomEE. It's actually our first year. We released our first version in October, Java 1 last year. So that was the very first certified version of TomEE, the very first release of TomEE ever. We've had a series of releases every few months since then. There's a sort of a larger gap between our 1.0 and our 1.5 release. Once we released the 1.0, we got so much feedback. It was just really difficult to close the lid on that next release. And by the time we did, we had so many features and improvements and fixes in there from all the feedback we got from people. We pushed the version number out to 0.5, and that's sort of symbolic of how Tomcat 5 went to 5.5 in the next really big release because of all the changes that they did. So we took a page from the Tomcat versioning and decided, all right, we're going to make it very obvious that there was a lot changed in this release. Some comments that we've gotten about TomEE are here. I cut out the server names because I think it's just really crass to talk badly about other servers. The point of the feedback is not to say that other servers are bad, it's to say that TomEE is worth looking at. And you know, I encourage everybody to look for themselves and evaluate TomEE yourself and give, you know, come to your own conclusions. I certainly don't recommend taking other people's words for it, but that should just give you some indication of where we're at. I kind of like the last comment the most, which is, you know, if you're concerned about footprint and memory, but you can stand to support yourself a little bit, TomEE is a server you've just got to check out. We're a young project, so all the support infrastructure is still getting there. Yeah, so bear with us. So here's an example of the kind of crazy year we've had. So that big lump there in the middle was our Java 1 announcement, and we've just been trending strongly upwards ever since. That's our mailing list traffic, which is going completely out of control. That's our user list traffic, so this one is development, and that one's just the user list. And here's all our commits are just going skyrocketing. So it's a very, very busy project. We're a bunch of busy bees. Here's the rub. The number of committers has actually kind of stayed the same. So if you ever had any, fantasies about becoming an app server developer or getting involved in an open source project, hey, we're right here. So that would be wonderful. We love to have new people on TomEE all the time as much as we can. Tweet, blog, articles are a great way to support TomEE. All right, so let me just give you a demo because talking about TomEE isn't necessarily as awesome as showing TomEE. So I'm just going to make a little demo directory. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually set TomEE up in Eclipse using the Tomcat web adapter. The great thing about the approach that we took to implementing all of this is, you know, TomEE works with the Tomcat tools. How does this happen? Well, I don't know what, yeah, so they don't necessarily have my whole screen up there. Maybe I can change my resolution. Yeah, hold on a second. HD. Do you 720? It's not listed. Oh, thank you, conference people. Okay, back to my resolution. Okay. Awesome. Okay. This might be too small. Or too big, I mean. It's better. Okay. All right. So extract. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to extract Eclipse right now, so that way we can see the full process of getting it set up. All right. So there's Eclipse, and then I'm going to extract the TomEE as well. And I'm going to extract the plus version of TomEE so you can see our heaviest distribution. So everything, all the other versions are going to, of course, be lighter. All right, and before we do that, before we do the Eclipse part, I'm going to actually show you TomEE booting up. So the important thing to note is that we're using the same start scripts and stuff that you find with Tomcat. All right. So there's the Tomcat splash page. You have all the Tomcat management tools and stuff are still there. We don't remove anything. So we also have a little TomEE GUI here that's a work in progress. There's not much branding there at this moment, but we'll be working on that. And then, yeah, so it's Tomcat as you know it and love it, and with the same tools. So go ahead and shut that down. And I'll open up Eclipse. Okay, and then first question, how many people use Eclipse? Yeah, almost the entire room. So if you've set up Tomcat in Eclipse, these steps are going to be very, very familiar with you. Workspace. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a dynamic web project. And the great thing about EE6 is that we added the ability for you to put basically everything in the WAR file. So EJBs can go into the WAR file, everything. So we say new runtime, we select Apache Tomcat 7 as the adapter, we hit next, and we're just going to add a little tag, TomEE, on the end here so we know that this is the JavaEE version of Tomcat. And then we browse to our demo directory where we extracted TomEE. We select it. We say open. We click finish, and then done. Now we're ready to code. So we're going to create a servlet here. All right, we're going to call it Hello Servlet. That's a Java package. I always do that. Okay. And then, of course, Eclipse always generates this boilerplate code. If you happen to get paid by the line of code, it's a really good deal, but I don't really like it myself. So we're just going to delete it. We don't need that. Okay, so we're just going to do a little hello world type of output. So we'll set the content type, not length. Text HTML. Response get writer. Okay, and then we're just going to have it print out hello servlet. Maybe make it nice and big. Okay, we'll save that, and then to run it, we just right-click on our servlet. We say run as, run on server. And it pops up this dialog box, which we can just say, yes, we just set it up. I don't know why you're asking me. And then we run it. Okay, and there's basic servlet running in TomEE. Now, we haven't done anything that you can't already do in Tomcat, so let's add here an EJB. So just say new class, call it hello bean. Finish. We'll make it a singleton. All right. Give it a method here. And have it return hello awesomeness. Okay. All right, now we can get that referenced in our servlet quite easily. We just make a private field, not a method. Come on. And then to get that injected, we just annotate it with JavaEE EJB. Okay. Now, we save our servlet, and that should just go ahead and reload. I don't actually have any output in here yet, so I'm just going to copy that line. And we'll update our print statement here. All right, now we'll save that and wait for the adapter to notice that it changed, and then there we go, reloaded. So we'll go back to our page and refresh, and now we see hello awesomeness, which we got from our EJB. So now we've just done EJB and servlets on Tomcat. We haven't Googled around, we haven't spent hours trying to do integration code. We're not following directions, adding jars, dealing with frustrations of things not being integrated or not working correctly. We're just getting started though. There's a lot more in the box. So we're going to add some web services support to this. All right. So we add the annotation at web service. We wait for the app to redeploy. And the nice thing is here, all our web service address is printed out in the log output, so we don't have to go hunting around in the documentation to figure out how to reach our new web service. There we go. Added 2 lines of code to our bean, and now we have web services with full WSDL. And again, no hunting around, no adding jars. We haven't had to throw any huge config files in there, anything at all like that. Well, now we have a web services support right there on Tomcat. And the cool thing about the web services support is that the security is completely integrated with Tomcat realms, so you can do web services security and have that authenticate against whatever realm you set up in Tomcat. So if you're using a JDBC realm or whatever, it all works completely integrated. Again, there's more in the box, so let's show some REST. And we'll say REST hello, and we'll make this a GET operation as well. Okay, we'll save that. And then it should redeploy automatically once the adapter notices the project has changed. There it goes. And also, again, we print the location of the REST service in the log file, so you can just copy that and you don't have to, again, search around for documentation. So there we go. Now we've just done EJB, web services, RESTful web services, and we haven't had to do anything. I mean, it's such a time saver. Yes, you can put all this stuff on Tomcat yourself, but can you do it in the 800 or something milliseconds it takes to reload and run this application? I mean, we've just done a lot of things that are pretty much impossible to do on Tomcat in short order. There's not a lot that we would need to do. There's almost no reason to not use something completely integrated once it's available. We're going to actually add a CDI bean in here as well, just for fun. So now with CDI, you need to turn it on by adding a beans XML to the web INF directory. Now that beans XML file doesn't have to contain anything. It just needs to be there for spec reasons. That's the way the spec is in terms of turning on functionality. Now here we don't actually need any annotations. We're going to do a similar type of we'll just say hello CDI for fun. We'll save that. And now we can get this injected into our servlet in a similar way. Hello Pojo. We annotate it with JavaX inject. We'll update our output. And then we'll save our servlet. And then the Eclipse tool should notice the project has changed and reload it. Okay. So back to our HTML output. There we go. CDI, EJB, web services, REST services, all of it on Tomcat, completely integrated. No hunting around for any libraries, no dropping stuff in, no Googling forever, no spending hours on Stack Overflow figuring out how to do this the hard way. Completely finished, done, certified. So, because that can look like a lot of magic, I think it's really important to see what we're doing under the covers to make this happen. It's not a whole lot. So, at a high level, we add these jars into the lib directory of Tomcat. We add a couple extra configuration files. You don't have to use them. They're for basically configuring JMS topics, JMS queues, things like that Tomcat configuration file doesn't support. So it's the spillover configuration, if you will. We add some extra exe files for booting TomEE easily as a Windows service. We add some jars to the endorsed directory because if you're familiar with some of the things that are in JAXB, for example, was added to the JVM, but then the JavaEE version of JAXB is one version higher than the one that's in the JVM, so it has to be, you have to add it to the endorsed directory and override it. And similar things with the commons annotations set of Java classes. There was a lookup attribute added to the @resource annotation. That's not in the JVM by default, so you have to add that. Then, this is really the only critical part. Aside from adding the libraries, we add a listener to Tomcat. So, between those two steps, that's really all the major things that we do to take Tomcat from just Tomcat to the JavaEE version of Tomcat. We've put it together like you put it together on Tomcat. We, like I say, unzip, add the jars, poke the server XML, zip it back up, run it through the TCK, and call it TomEE, and there it's yours to download and enjoy. We do add a Java agent to the Catalina SH file and the Catalina BAT, and that's simply because some JPA providers like OpenJPA and Eclipse Link use runtime enhancement to support JPA, and that requires a Java agent. So we have that set up for you already. So testing, what does it mean to be certified? Being certified is a process of running this very, very large TCK on the server. So all the servers that are standard certified JavaEE servers have this big, huge test suite. Tens of thousands of tests are in it, and it takes quite a long time to run. It takes about a week. It could take a long time if you run it linearly. What we do is we chop this thing up into like 750 chunks of tests. We throw it up onto Amazon EC2. We fire up an JMS queue, which is ActiveMQ. We put all the tests in there. Then we spawn off, say, like 100 T1 microinstances. We pull all the tests down. We run them. We aggregate the results back over a topic. And now we can get full TCK results in basically 2 hours. So this is a really big reason why we were able to do TomEE at all, because it just takes a really long time to run the TCK. It takes a lot of resources. So we built this tool for ourselves, which allows us to be like very agile as a project. The interesting thing about this, and the reason why I mentioned it, is that we run TomEE on the T1 micro instances. So we're actually certified on T1 micro instances, the M1 smalls and the C1 mediums. The T1 micro instances have like 613 megabytes of memory. We only use the default settings for the JVM when we run the TCK on TomEE. So you have basically a 64 megabyte heap. So we're passing the whole TCK in a 64 megabyte heap. That's really great news for you, because that means if you're using the T1 micro instance, which has very slow disk speed, the I/O is horribly slow, you need the memory for yourself to get performance out of it. So 613 megabytes of memory minus the 64, and the rest is yours. So you could actually do some really important, cool stuff on these small types of devices and small instances with TomEE because of its very small footprint. One of our committers just got working on the Raspberry Pi, and I think it'd be kind of fun to certify on that just for laughs, but it's pretty neat. We also run our own tests because we're growing our own set of tests. Anytime someone submits a bug report, we create an Arquillian test for it and make sure that there's never going to be regression on that. And so we test all sorts of stuff with Arquillian these days, and we test all of our flavors of TomEE with the same test. We will run the same test like 5 or 6 times. It's pretty cool. The results, we got the whole web profile certified on Tomcat in about 27 megabytes of downloads size. The the TomEE Plus is 44 megabytes, so not much bigger. And again, it works with all the tools that use Tomcat. It's all very tightly integrated. We have hundreds of hours of tests on it effectively between all the machines that we run, and it's certified. So some quick points about doing things yourself, because it can be very, very tempting to go, well, I have all these things on Tomcat, and it's probably the same thing as what TomEE is, and so why should we switch? It's already working. Well, here's some things that make it difficult to do that. So one, every time you add a new technology, that's more that has to be integrated. So I think kind of people are hitting a wall with things like, say, trying to get CDI into Tomcat and integrate it into web services. So you make a web service, and you want add inject support in that web service. Well, you don't have it because they're not integrated. It gets harder and harder to bind these things together yourself. It's also very slow. So there's a tremendous amount of annotation scanning that has to be done in the JavaEE libraries these days. So you add JSF into Tomcat, well, here's what's going to happen. Tomcat's going to scan your entire WAR file for servlets and web listeners and all those things. Then you add the JSF provider and then say MyFaces in there. Now MyFaces is going to scan your whole web app again, looking for @managedbean. Then you add CDI in there, and CDI is going to scan the entire web app looking for CDI beans. So now you're doing it 3 times. And then same thing with JAX-RS, same thing with JPA. And what's bad about this is not just that you're scanning this many times, is that now all these libraries, which are essentially server bits, are in the web app. So now you have MyFaces scanning OpenJPA, OpenJPA scanning MyFaces. It gets much, much, much slower. Then it's bloated. So your web app is now very huge, and all these classes are loaded in the web app class loader. So you have 2 web apps in Tomcat, perhaps. Both of them are going to have these libraries in there. You're wasting a little bit of memory with that. Also, there's a sort of false assumption that these libraries are actually 100% complete. In actuality, that's not true. For example, JTA managed entity managers is in the JPA spec, but it's not implemented by OpenJPA because they really can't. It requires a container to give JTA proxied versions of the entity manager. So that feature is not there. So you drop OpenJPA into Tomcat yourself, you're still not going to get container managed entity managers, which means no JTA transactions with that entity manager. Also, OpenWebBeans, it's a nice little independent CDI implementation, but they don't implement the inner parts where CDI integrates with things like EJB. So they actually only run 60% of the TCK on OpenWebBeans. So again, you drop OpenWebBeans into Tomcat, and you're missing a huge chunk of functionality still. And then Tomcat itself, it randomly decides to implement the things that they like and don't implement the things they don't think are critical. So some very fundamental things, like we added global JNDI into EE6, and Tomcat didn't implement it. They just used the same old JNDI that we had for the last 15 years. Global JNDI is great. You can share between web apps quite easily with the same namespace. That would be something people might want, but again, it's not in Tomcat. Also, The data source definition annotation, which is really, really critical, allows you to put your data source right in your web app and just deploy that, and you don't have to use any server-specific configuration. And again, that's not implemented by Tomcat. So these are all some of the things that we have to fill, the gaps that we have to fill in order to create TomEE. And so yeah, when you chuck all these libraries into Tomcat, you're maybe only 40% or 60% of the way there to an actual web profile, not because you're missing major portions of the spec, you're missing all the integration between the specifications. So the result is, how many tests do you run on your Tomcat stack? When you put all these things into Tomcat, do you run thousands and thousands of tests? No. I mean, that's what a TCK is. A lot of people I hear say, oh, there's no value in JavaEE. JavaEE is a dead thing. Let's be clear. JavaEE is a bunch of specifications and a huge TCK that gives you compliance, that gives you the guarantee that your stuff is going to run. I encourage everyone to not think of JavaEE as this huge bloated set of specifications. I encourage people to think of JavaEE as a lot of tests. That's what it is. It's a huge amount of tests. They're protecting you. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. So portability is something that you don't get from cobbling these things together yourself. There's just a lot of stuff. So I'm going to actually show you on the testing node. I'm going to show you a really big part of what we like in TomEE is Arquillian support. And there's a little fun slogan: "All your bugs belong to us." Aslak wants a picture. Go ahead. Got it. All right. So we have several adapters for TomEE. We've got a remote adapter. If you're familiar with, who's all familiar with Arquillian already? Yeah. So this is great about when we show TomEE. When we show Arquillian, it was maybe like 5% of the room. It's very small. So Arquillian is just a wonderful testing framework. It allows you to run. Here, I'll just show it to you. Let's do that. Show it to you. Let's do that. So this is actually the TomEE build here. So we've got a whole huge chunk of tests. So all these tests here are Arquillian tests. We've got some JMS tests and things like that. So a whole lot of stuff. That's what we really big into it. All right. So I'm just going to run them so you can see basically the speed. This is an integration test. Test your full web app in the server. We're going to run, say, 3 tests, and boom, that completed in about, rounding up 6 seconds. Very light. The actual test itself is very small. So it's a JUnit test. And the important thing to note here is we got the runs with. So that's a JUnit annotation, part of the standard set. We say runs with Arquillian, and that's where the magic happens. Then we implement a number of regular old tests, annotated at test. Here's the next bit of really awesome magic, is we have this method that's annotated with @deployment. And what we're doing in this method is we're actually building a web archive with only the things we want in it. So this is really cool because a lot of the mocking concerns that people have, you can actually do a lot of that with this. So oftentimes I write a lot of tests where I have an interface for something, and then I just don't include the heavy implementation in my little war. I include a mocked-up version, which you could put right here as an inner class of the test. You could just, whatever you wanted to do. So we're explicitly adding all of our components, each class individually, to this war file. And of course, you can add mocked versions instead of the real versions. So you have complete control over the class path of the web app. You have complete control over everything. So really the kind of the future of testing is lots of very small, focused web apps rather than deploying the one big, huge web app all the time and only running one test on it. And focus your applications onto the very very minimum that you need to test that functionality, and then that brings you into a unit testing world. Second really cool thing, or I maybe have lost count at this point, is you can debug. You don't need any remote adapters or any fancy ports. You don't need to boot up on 5050, anything like that. We have an embedded adapter for TomEE. There's an embedded version of TomEE. That's what we saw running. If we want, we can actually debug through our test. So now we can run our regular old test and do some debugging. There we go. So this particular test is testing that servlets can have constructor injection, and now we can see we have our constructor is called, and there we go. So we have our car with our value, with a nice Lexus. That's a really cool car. Anyway, so this is really fundamentally different. I mean, how many of you who don't use Arquillian write a lot of tests for your JavaEE applications? Yeah, so not so many hands. Maybe 6, I think I saw. You should be writing tests, and it's such a fundamental shift in the way that you do work. Writing JavaEE applications and not being able to test them and develop them, do a test-driven sort of development cycle is really limiting. You know, the great thing about this is that this test doesn't just run against the embedded version of TomEE, it runs against a separate TomEE running somewhere else on your network. So you can take this test and use it in development, then use that test against another server in QA, and if you want to run a test against some other sort of staged server, you can do that. You don't have to change the test at all, you just use a different Arquillian adapter under the covers. And there's a simple XML file that you can change. And not only do these tests work on versions of TomEE, but they work on any server that has an Arquillian adapter. So they'll work on JBoss, they'll work on Glassfish. So your tests are the most critical and valuable asset that you have in your development process. It's this is a kind of a game changer for JavaEE. I like to say it like this: Arquillian plus TomEE is bliss. And that's really the truth, because now you can finally develop your JavaEE applications as plain old applications, debug through your code quickly and easily. It's really significant. So we have a bunch of adapters. One down there at the bottom, this OpenEJB adapter. That's essentially TomEE without the Tomcat bits, so it's a little faster. I definitely recommend checking it out. We also have Maven support. Here's another little fun slogan. If you know Eclipse, or excuse me, Emacs at all, there's a nice little fun thing that, you know, it can send email. It's like, why would a text editor need to send email? But it can. It's same thing with Maven. It tends to basically do everything these days. So here's an example of completely abusing what Maven was set out to do. We have a plugin for Maven, which for TomEE, which allows you to basically provision a TomEE server, set up the ports, put libraries into the lib directory. So you got your JDBC driver, you want to throw that in the library directory, and then how many web apps do you want in there? Boom, boom, throw those in there. Which one do you want as the root web app? And then it can start and stop and debug your server. So basically, this is all the scripting that you would typically need to do yourself to actually get a flavor of the server up and running. The cool thing about this is you put this in a POM file, you put all your web apps as dependencies, you put all your libraries and your drivers as dependencies. Maven goes and downloads them from your repo. So if you're running Nexus or Artifactory or something like that, grabs all your code, puts it in TomEE, boots TomEE up, all the work is done. This is the coolest little plugin ever. It was written by a great guy in our project, Roma, and he always does lots of really fun creative stuff. And you can use whatever version of TomEE that you want. So you can use a plus version, you can use the web profile version, and you can even specify different versions of TomEE. So over the last year, we've gained some steam with some of the other vendors in the market. So here's a sort of thank you to them and to let you know about some of the tools. So IntelliJ, they maybe a month ago have an early access of IntelliJ with TomEE support in it. It's just a slightly enhanced version of the Tomcat support. Most recent is New Relic, just added support for TomEE in their platform. JRebel, you can do all of the zero turnaround, fast deploy stuff with JRebel using TomEE. Then some cloud providers or hosting providers. MetaWorks is an Australian hosting company that's really large. They offer a lot of TomEE support in terms of platforms you can deploy. Staccato is an active state cloud solution. They have support for TomEE. And then coming soon to a theater near you, I guess actually that really works because we're in a theater, is Jelastic is announcing support for TomEE as well. So I'll just give you some screenshots. So here's an example of you can provision a TomEE server, and they have a little clever logo. It's a kind of a tiger version of the Tomcat logo. And so you select TomEE. You can set up load balancing with Nginx. You configure your database. And then you can do high availability stuff and SSL and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be released very soon. I've been working with them for the last maybe month or two since Java 1, and I've been really impressed with how aggressive they are in just adding support for stuff like this. So I know I'll personally be looking forward to seeing that support coming. That brings me to another point. So I put the logos of these different vendors on there. Well, where's our logo? We kind of need one. So for now until the 1 month from now, we're starting a logo contest, and I really encourage people to tap their design department on the shoulder and say, hey, let's make make a logo for TomEE and submit it, and that would be really cool. So if you just go to this little website, and I'll show it to you. If you just go to tomeeapache.org, logo. Oh, did I lose my internet? I did. That's no fun. Okay. Anyway. All right. So there's the URL. So go ahead and take your pictures of that, and definitely help us get a logo. That would be really great. We're going to print out some T-shirts. I'm wearing a T-shirt. This is sort of a temporary logo. This is the stand-in logo that we have until the logo contest is finished. Yeah, so definitely help out with that. In terms of other interesting bits of functionality that is in TomEE, we have sort of a unique perspective on failing deploys. So historically, what happens when and while I'm talking, I'll say there are several problems with this bean, and be looking for them while I'm talking. And then I'll ask anybody, to tell me one thing that's wrong with this bean. And if you can do it, well, I'll tweet you as a hero of Java. So with a standard server, you build this big app, you throw it in the server, they go to try and run it, they find the first problem, and they kick it back to you and say, this one thing is wrong. You fix that one thing, and then the next problem is there, sitting in your web app, and then they kick that back to you and say, now that's wrong. And you do this all day. You just compile, package, deploy, test. Nope, doesn't work. And you do that all day. So what we do is we find all of the problems that we can with your app. We report them all at once, and so therefore you can fix them in one go. You don't have to repeat. So we try as hard as we can to go as far as we can in deployment, collect all of the issues that we found, and then spit them out to you. So in this particular situation, usage of @EJB at the top, which would declare a JNDI name and that EJB to be looked up. You don't have a type for it. So bean interface was missing. So we found, all right, you've illegally used that annotation. The @resource says you want a data source, but actually it's only in string. You haven't specified the type. It should say type equals data source in the @resource usage. So we say the @resource annotation is missing type. Secondly, we even try to look at things where we don't normally, where people don't normally look. So annotations are really only valid on the bean class itself in most situations. So here we put a bunch of them on the interface. So we actually took the time to look in the interface and tell you, yeah, you've put a lot of annotations in the interface. Those aren't going to work. You need to move them to the bean class. So we try as hard as we can to watch your back and save you time. We don't want we want TomEE to be sort of a learning tool as well. So rather than not knowing why your app doesn't work because you forgot one little attribute of an annotation and spending the next 2 days reading a specification, we want to tell you what's required to make that application work. So we actually implement, this is the default level of output, but we do 3 levels. So the first level is very short and very terse. We just say very bluntly, you did XXXX wrong. Then the second level, we add a little bit of extra information, but we still try and keep it on one line. On the third level, I like to describe it as the email that you would write to explain what the person's supposed to do to make it work. So it's a multi-line text output that even sometimes has code snippets in it. So if you needed to add a specific annotation to a method, we'll put that method name in there, then add the annotation and show you the code. So a lot of times you can just copy and paste that into your application. We do this very extensively for EJB and a lot of injection stuff, and we're expanding this support throughout all the JavaEE stuff. But it's a fundamental belief of the project that we should be giving you compile-style feedback on your application. And imagine how difficult Java would be if it just failed after the first compile error, and you would spend forever trying to write a single application. The same thing is true for JavaEE. It's such a large specification with a growing number of annotations, and even I forget how to use annotations, and a lot of times I help make them. So I don't know how anybody does it. This is just a critical thing. Also in configuration, I'll just show you the configuration. We don't believe in heavily nested XML. So you've got all these objects that go all the way in, then all the way back out, then all the way in, then all the way back out. I mean, that's just really, really, really hard for users. You personally, I guarantee, do not care how our server is internally composed. You do not need to see that in your configuration file. What you want is it flat as possible level of configuration so you can see all of the values up front right there. So we have a sort of hybrid XML properties mix which we sort of lifted from the Apache HTTPD configuration file, and that just really, really simplifies the configuration. The properties are not case sensitive, so if you get the case wrong, it's okay. Also, if you specify a property that does not exist, that is not valid, we will report that as an error in the log file. Another thing is that you can have your configuration file be as small as you want it to be. So if there are in fact like 15 different settings for a data source, you don't need to specify all 15 of them in your configuration file, and deleting one won't cause the server to crash when you boot it. If you delete the one, we just get the default value for that. It's fine. And in fact, I encourage people to not have very big, large configuration files, to have configuration files where only the settings that you want to be different are shown. That would be the way that I would encourage people to use these configuration files. So have the settings that are significant to your environment in the configuration file, then rely on the defaults. You could maybe keep them in there, just comment it out, but it makes it much easier to see what you're actually doing in the configuration file and what has been changed. Thirdly, if you Don't specify that you needed a stateless container. We'll just make one for you. If you deploy an application that needs a stateless container because you have a stateless bean, we'll make a stateless container for you. So you can actually have nothing in your TomEE configuration file, and TomEE will still deploy your app, making all of the things that we're missing to deploy your app. So what we don't want is for you to try and deploy an app and then spend the next day adding all this configuration bits before you know if you even like TomEE and if it's worth that day. We want it so that you can just drop your app in. We'll make all the stuff that's required to deploy that application, JMS topics, JMS queues, that kind of stuff, and we'll just add it to your application. We will log everything that we've added so that way you can explicitly put in your configuration file should you want to, but there really is no need. Another thing is that we're really, really big on human readable times. Like, seriously, we're all great computer scientists, but why are we measuring everything in milliseconds only? It makes no sense at all. You've got this huge timeout. I want a transaction timeout of a half an hour, and then you're sitting there with your calculator and you're figuring out, what is 15 minutes or 17 minutes in milliseconds, and then you're adding that to your configuration file. And there's, if you're a little bit tired, you add that to your configuration file, and heaven forbid you forget a zero, because that's a totally different time. And then you've got a really big problem and a really big bug, and it's really going to be really difficult to spot. So we want you to be able to say 2 minutes and 2 seconds is the timeout for this. There are lots of timeouts in JavaEE, so you should be able to specify all of them using plain language. So you can say 1 day, 5 hours, 42 minutes and 3 seconds. You can even abbreviate 15 min, MIN, or 5M, all of these work. So this is all documented on the website on how you use it, but it's basically just plain English. So now you can see, without having to pull the calculator out, what that timeout is. That's a really important thing. And of course, you can put comments in your stuff. You can put all the server configuration in the web app if you want. So if you want to declare your data sources and things like that in your web app, that totally works. Here's meta INF resources. You can put it into web INF resources XML, and everything that you can declare in the TomEE server TomEE XML file, except for the transaction manager, you can declare in the resource XML. The reason we don't allow you to declare the transaction manager in the resource XML file is because there's one transaction manager for the whole server, and it doesn't make sense to allow individual web apps to have their own private transaction manager. If you don't like XML, that's me, you can use properties. So there's a property equivalent for everything that there is an XML for. So here we're doing this. This is the same configuration file that we had before, but now in properties. And the cool thing about it is we've got this file under the conf directory called system.properties. And as you might guess, we take those properties and we load them into the system.properties file, into the system.properties object. So you can actually do a lot of VM configuration. Anything that we do a -D flag for in, say, like Java ops, you could probably move that into the system.properties file, make it a little bit easier to maintain. Also, you can do it in -D VM properties. You don't have to use the system.properties file. You can just use regular old JVM -D flags and do all that configuration there as well. So these things can be combined. So here we have a TomEE XML file which just declares the transaction manager and the timeout we want for transactions. We declare the data source in our web app, and then on the command line in our Catalina ops or our Java ops, we're overriding values from our XML files on the command line. So we externally are setting our data source username and password, and then we actually went ahead, we decided to change our transaction timeout to 1 hour. So a lot of the kind of maintenance things that you write all, I see people write the ability to change and edit server configuration files kind of dynamically because they want to change 1 or 2 things. Well, you can just do that all built in with TomEE. You can have as much of the configuration wherever you want it, whenever you want it. I mean, you can have it all in system properties and JVM flags. You can have it in the system properties file. You can have it in the XML in the server. You can have it right there in the web app. Or a mix of all of them. You can extend TomEE, and I'm running out of time, but here's a really quick example. Here we have a color object. The same overriding works. We have say like a Twitter object. This is kind of Spring-like thing. And then you can have these injected into your application via @resource. So just like you're declaring JMS topics and JDBC data sources in your XML files, you can do the same thing with your own objects. So suddenly you can externalize your configuration and then not have to use like an EJB jar XML file or a web XML file in JNDI garbage. You can just put it right in this XML file in your web app, and then all the overriding stuff that I just showed works. So you can now override your own objects on the command line via system properties, whatever. It's pretty great. Questions? I'm out of time, but I'm sure we have enough time for some questions. No? Yeah? Yeah, so it has been started to use since our April release. Some people have started to put it out into production. I give these talks, and then someone will come up to me and say, "Oh, wow, we've been using TomEE, for the last like 3 months, and we just love it." And so yeah, we're definitely hearing of a lot of people using it in production. I had a person talk to me after a conference last week, and they said, we just moved from SE to EE with TomEE, and we've never had as much fun developing applications as we've had since TomEE, which I think is a really great compliment. But yeah, there's a lot of people starting to put it into production. I think the great advantage of TomEE is that it's Tomcat. So Tomcat's solid. It's been in production for a long time. So it's just as solid. Now, the parts that we put in TomEE are really, really road tested. OpenJPA has been out there for a really long time. It's not a new persistence framework. It's solid. So it's pretty good. There are a lot of people putting it in production and very happy with it. It really depends on the size of your application. I've seen LifeRay boot with 300 megs of memory. So that's pretty small. And that LifeRay is, I forget how large it is. It's like 200 plus megabytes of server size, or maybe much more. You don't need a lot of memory. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. And any tweets you want to give, that'd be great. And blog posts and articles, and please try out TomEE, and I really hope you enjoy it. So thank you very much.